I went back into the city of Oxford for the first time in quite a while, just a couple of weeks ago, for a meal with Caroline, and it was very odd, the number of things that you notice having been out of the city for a few years. One of the things that's really interesting about Oxford is that there are cameras pretty much everywhere, CCTV cameras, watching what's going on. Sadly, they didn't prevent me from having my bike stolen or help me find the person who stole it a few years back when that happened. But there are cameras in many streets watching the goings-on and reporting it to the police or to private security companies. In fact, Britain has quite a culture of this. London has the most surveillance cameras per person of any European city, and I think it's third in the world after two Chinese cities. We really do have a culture of watching every move. I don't know how you feel about that, the idea that you're always being watched. In fact, in China, they are taking it a step further. There's a system that they're trialing called social credit, which involves watching people's moves and assessing them, and then assigning them a credit score based on whether they do mostly good things or mostly bad things. So if you go to visit your elderly relatives, if you pay your taxes, if you say positive things about the government on social media, then you get positive points. If you drop litter or let your dog walk off the lead or say negative things about people in charge, fail to pay your taxes, you get negative points. And these are all being assessed in big data centers, and you're then provided with a score which controls what you're allowed to do and what facilities you have access to. It's a really interesting idea. I don't find that very comfortable personally. I don't know how you feel about it. But this is David's starting point in Psalm 139. He starts by saying, God, you know me and you see me all the time. And when he says it that first time, it's just said as a statement. It's not necessarily said with a great amount of emotion. He's not giving an emotional reaction to it. He's just saying, God, you know it all. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk us today through how he meditates on that truth. Now, meditation, when you think about the word meditation, perhaps you think about Buddhists focusing on a single syllable, emptying their minds, holding an interesting pose and saying Om or something like that. And obviously it does get used in that way, but there is such a thing as scriptural meditation. The Bible has plenty to say about it. And it's more like worrying over a bone. If you've ever seen a dog do that, they kind of sit down with it between their paws and they turn it over and they gnaw at it. And then they leave it for a minute and then they turn it over again and gnaw at it again in a different angle. And bit by bit, they gnaw that bone down. And that's what it is to meditate on Scripture, to turn it over and to bring different angles on it and to see where that takes us. And that's what we're going to look at today, how David does that. He starts off with this, God, you see me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar, you discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word's even on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. There's that statement of God, you just see and know everything. And then he goes a step further. You hem me in, behind and before. You've laid your hand upon me. You see here, there's not necessarily comfort in this to start with. Actually, he could feel a little bit claustrophobic in this setting. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. These words are perhaps very familiar to you, but these are words of inescapability. David's saying, I can't get away from you, God. Wherever I go, you're there. Everywhere. All the places, all the time. And again, at this point in time, there's not necessarily an emotional response to that. He's just processing this fact that God knows everything and God is everywhere. He's totally inescapable. As his thoughts progress, he starts to think about what it must be like for God to know everything, to be everywhere. And he says this, if I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. This is David digging right down into the depths of what it means to be totally all-knowing. He says there's no darkness, there's no hiding, there's nothing that can prevent you from seeing and knowing everything. And this is the truth he's got to by worrying over. God, you see me and you know me. He's got to this deep truth that really nothing at all can be hidden from God, ever, anywhere, any time. And then he has this light bulb moment. And you see it come out. He says, okay, well, God, if you know everything about me, if nothing hides anybody or anything from you, then you saw me when I was in my mother's womb. Now, that's just the most intimate picture possible. Our mothers probably know us better than most people. They carried us for 9 months. They raised and nursed us in most cases. They've seen us at our worst and at our best. They've coached us through all kinds of things. They've taught us all kinds of things, and they tend to know us really pretty well. But those 9 months when you're in the womb, even your mother can't see you. The occasional scan, they can feel the kicks or the uncomfortable positions, but they can't see you. And yet God sees. And David ties that together with the fact that God's created him, and he writes these beautiful verses. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. How does he say fearfully and wonderfully? Well, because he's already established that God knows everything and sees everything. And if somebody like that makes you, wow. If your creator is the one who sees and knows everything, isn't that amazing? I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. We see now how his thoughts have moved on. He's combined this God knows everything with this understanding that that's a loving place, that's a caring place, that the one who knows and sees everything loves and cares for him and is concerned with those tiny details as well. His view of God opens up totally. Perhaps you've seen what are called impossible figures. M.C. Escher was well known for drawing these, and you might be familiar with some of his drawings, but one of the most famous ones is something called the Penrose Triangle. And if you look at this picture, you can see, if you look at it carefully, that it's impossible. Faces seem to disappear into nothing and new faces appear where there shouldn't be. Corners turn into sides and sides turn into corners. And although you can construct it on 2D paper, it's impossible to make it in real life, in 3D. Except that it's not totally. What you can do is you can make a shape which looks like this, but actually when you turn it around, it isn't like this. And there's one of these in Perth in Australia, actually, and I'll just show you a picture of that now. And the way that it's built, just visualize it for you, is that from the front it looks like that impossible triangle, but as you turn it around, you see it has a depth to it that you weren't able to perceive because you were just looking at it front on. And this is what David does. He starts off with this flat picture. God, you see everything and you know everything. But then as he comes at it from a different angle, he sees a depth to God's character that he previously didn't see. And suddenly it doesn't just look impossible, it looks incredible and deep and complex. I'd encourage us to approach Scripture like that, to look for these deep things of God that uncover how his vast sovereignty sits together with his intimate love and care. Now, you may have heard it said that we love because God first loved us. It's true. It's right there in the Scriptures. We see it at work here. David realizes God's love for him as he meditates on this Scripture. And what's his response? His response is this outpouring of praise. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And then it's almost like he tries and has a go at trying to sort of plumb the depths of God, because the next thing he says is, when I awake, I'm still with you. It's almost like he's gone off on a sort of a tangent into a bit of a daydream, which perhaps you do when you meditate on Scripture. I know sometimes I do. And then he comes back to himself and says, and you're still with me now, God. And then this love for God turns into a sense of, but God, your honor matters. You matter. Your name matters. He says, if only you would slay the wicked, O God. Away from me, bloodthirsty men. They speak evil of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name, and I hate those who hate you, God, and abhor those who rise against you. I have nothing but hatred for them, and I count them my enemies. Now, perhaps when you read through this psalm, you want to skip over those verses because they're not perhaps emotions that we associate with good Christian thinking. But we need to understand what's going on here with David. He's going from acknowledging that there's a distant God who sees and knows everything to there's a personal God who sees and knows me and loves me. And out of that comes this heart response of, and I love you wholeheartedly. And you are my friend, and I am your friend. And that means that anything that you don't like, I don't like. And that means anybody that you have, have abhorrence for, I have abhorrence for. And this very human reaction of love in response to God's love. And then finally, he returns back to that original truth. He says, God, you see me and you know me. But this time it comes from that knowledge of God's love. He says this, instead of you see me and you know me, search me, O God. There's an invitation. Search me, O God. Know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. He's come full circle back to that truth he started with, but now he understands more and has appreciated more of God's character and God's love. And that causes him to approach that first truth in a totally different way. And with much more faith, with much more vision, with much more a sense of welcoming this truth about God. This is what it can be to meditate on Scripture. We bring it alongside other truths we know. We turn it over in the presence of God, in conversation with him. And then we come back to those truths with a fresh sight of them. And I want to encourage you to be doing that as you talk over these truths in just a bit.